Okay, I've been working on a presentation for you for the last couple of weeks where I've documented my New Zealand white rabbit process. And this actually includes some modeling so we can determine, what the optimal amount of rabbits to mate and what your expected yield will be. So this ought to be really interesting, but this kind of starts from the beginning, and I think it's pretty comprehensive, but I think we should be able to get through this in about 20 minutes. So let me know what you think, but this is gives a little background on the type of rabbits that I chose and why I chose them, and some interesting facts about rabbits. But again, I'm primarily doing New Zealand whites. I have one Holland Lop, but other than that, it's 99% New Zealand whites. I actually have some black New Zealand male that I've mated, and so I'm getting some other colors too, but primarily whites. All right, so the first part is, what is a New Zealand rabbit? So according to Wiki, it's actually an American breed. They think it may have been imported from New Zealand, but I don't know. It sounds like they've kind of maybe lost track, but these are very large rabbits, and they're intended specifically for meat. They are also for pet rabbits, but they were originally bred for meat. Yeah, I already kind of gave that punchline, but they take, in my case, I'm growing out to about 12 weeks because that's what I found. My rabbits will be about 5 pounds in weight, and I'll yield about 2.5 to 3 pounds of processed meat. So that's the reason why I'm using this. They also, reason why they like the white is for making hats and glove lining and such. The white was much easier to dye. So I don't know. I've got some black bunnies that just absolutely look gorgeous, and I may end up doing something with those pelts. But yeah, the white is a very pretty color pelt, and you can do a lot of things with it. One thing about the meat is it's considered very healthy within reason. So when you look up at the top left, you can see the cholesterol is lower than chicken, beef, and pork. The calories, it's a lower amount of calories, and that actually corresponds with the amount of fat in the next slide. And then the percentage of protein is extremely high. So the meat can be grilled, roasted, braised, fried, stewed, and barbecued. Myself, I like pressure cooking. Kind of speeds up the process, and then I can make my stews, just put it right in the stew, or I can eat it right out of the pressure cooker. I usually put it in with some chicken broth and beef broth, and then when I take it out, I have some sauce that I put on there. It's a garlic sriracha sauce that I absolutely just love, and I'll eat it straight out of the pressure cooker that way. It's outstanding. My grandkid loves the rabbit legs. He eats them just like chicken legs. He thinks it's the best thing in the world. So, because it is so lean, there have been problems in the past where people have been living in extreme conditions, and all they could do was find rabbits, and because it was so lean, and I guess because it was super cold, they didn't have vegetables and other things, but they ended up having a severe craving for fatty or oily foods, and terrible side effects of diarrhea, headaches, and just insatiable hunger. So you basically would eat rabbit till you were stuffed, but you'd never feel full because your body was craving for fats that it just would not provide. So if you eat rabbit along with a balanced diet, it's not a problem. Like I said, I like rabbit stews. I also love wrapping rabbit in a bacon and smoking for several hours, and so you actually are reintroducing fats with your diet using bacon. And and you just wouldn't believe how good that is. It's outstanding. Anything you do with bacon's good, right? All right, so I started my rabbitry a little bit over a year ago, and I found this slide at 100daysrabbitry.com, and I have been doing selective breeding, and I'm trying to actually get the, as big a rabbit as possible to grow in the shortest amount of time. And if you're doing this for food, that's what you ought to be doing. You ought to be, like, not just winging it, but trying to get the best product you can, because it costs money to do this. I did a previous presentation. I'll probably update it sometime because things are getting much better, and I'm sure my costs are coming down now. I can just tell things are just working much more efficiently. So here's a comparison between two different types of rabbits, and you can just see the New Zealand white just is a brute as far as meat that's available for it, and I've been very happy with the meat that I'm getting out of my New Zealands. I can't argue with it. It looks great. Now here's a growth chart, and so I've been now trying to plot my product, or my rabbits, as they proceed along here, and see if I'm following, and it's pretty close. You can see that there's some separation up here at the, I have two screens, so every once in a while I'm trying to point at the large screen, but it's on my laptop is where I need to be pointing. So you can see that the females actually have kind of a growth spurt in this range, and they actually outpace the males, which is a little bit different. When I did the chickens actually, by 2 months, the roosters were, a little bit over a pound heavier than the females. So I had to process them first, and then, when the females, a week later, they would catch up, and then I'd process them. But the rabbits kind of do this here, and then you can see that the males end up surpassing farther out this way. So I think that's kind of an interesting chart. So the bottom line is over here in this range, this is when you're in the 12-week, which is 3 months, you should be getting about a 5-pound rabbit, and then you're going to yield about 2.5 to 3 pounds of meat. The bones are very light in this, so they do not comprise a large amount of that processed meat at the end. So I'm very happy so far with the way this is working out. All right, here's some characteristics of the New Zealand I highlighted in red. This was a chart that showed all different kinds of other rabbits, but the New Zealand here, it tells the typical litter size, once you get to weaning, which would be about 6 to 8 weeks. So I'm at about 7.5, and of course, wintertime you get a higher yield. It's just more comfortable for the rabbits. When you're moving through the summer, it's really tough on them, and a lot of people just shut down. I might see, but I'm adding some fans and other things this year to see how it works out. The pregnancy rate is also only 63%, and I'm seeing about 75%. And then, if you use their numbers, the litter sizes and the annual litters per female, you can get 7 litters. And it depends on how many cages you've got and everything as to how many litters you can actually process. You'll see what my capability is when we get here. And then the number of rabbits per female per year, and then the individual weight at weanings. These are grams, weight at 77 days, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyways, you can use these numbers to then, model, and then when you get your own numbers, you can plug and chug. So I'll show you what I've got. So let's go ahead, and I wanted to show you, I'm not doing organic or anything, but I'm very careful of what type of food I feed my rabbits besides what I get out of my garden. They primarily need pellets and Timothy hay, or in my case I'm using Timothy grass. That was a recent change in one of my videos you probably saw. But there were 2 primary reasonably priced pellets that are available. And so you have the Producer's Pride and you have the Mana Pro. And so I took the ingredients side by side and I put it in this table up here. And so you can see that there's crude protein, fat, fiber, and there's just some very slight differences here. Like you can see the fat difference, then you can see the fiber difference. But anyways, I looked at it and I saw that it was $1.30 difference between the two, and almost negligible difference in the ingredients. So I decided to just use this Producer's Pride, and this is from Tractor Supply. This Timothy grass is a recent change that I've implemented. I used to buy bales of Timothy hay, but I would argue a lot of times I was getting like Timothy straw, and it just, the rabbits were not thriving on that. And so they're actually about 50-50 between eating the pellets and that grass, and they're doing very well with that by the addition of adding that grass. So the hutches that I build are 3 foot by 8 foot, so 3 foot wide. In fact, if you look over here on the side, this is the 3 foot, and then they're 8 feet long, and then they're 24 inches tall. So you can see my wife in the background. She's 5 foot 2.5, she would say, and that gives you an idea. But this is just made out of 2x2s, and I have a 2x4 base, and then I use the welded wire, hardware cloth they call it, with the 1/2-inch squares. And I put the wire on the inside of the cages so the rabbits are not exposed to the pressure treated wood. And then up here on the top, you can see I put a more 2x2s, and I make a frame and then put metal roofing on. And the majority of my hutches are like this, where they can split in half. But I like this design, and I've talked about it in a previous video. I can actually divide this into by 4, by 3, by 2, or just leave it wide open if I have an extremely large litter. So these have been very flexible, and they're very easy to build. I mean, honestly, I just have a pneumatic staple gun for stapling the wire down. I have a compound miter saw, but it's just, you just need a chop saw because I'm just cutting straight edges. And then you just need a drill and a electric screwdriver to, and I use the very nice decking screws, so this thing will last forever the way they're built. And plus the majority of my stuff's undercover anyways, and that's going to make it last forever as well. In fact, here we go, we're going to talk about this. So when I first started, I had just a covered area up by the house where I was raising my rabbits, and then we built a deck up here, and you can see I made these cutouts so that we could put my hutches over these cutouts, so when the rabbits peed and pooped, it would just fall underneath. And then we ended up putting a shade cloth over, and then that just really wasn't adequate. But unfortunately, the monsoon rains we get here in North Georgia, the food was just getting wet and it was a mess, and so I decided to just go ahead and put a metal roof over the whole thing. So that was just recently done. So this has been a little journey working through this, but this is now working out really well. Now the only thing I gotta do is run some power down there, and but you can see I've got a greenhouse. Here we go, greenhouse. This is my grow out area, and then I've also got to where I raise my Cornish crosses. Right now I've got some Rhode Island Reds that are just now maturing, and so they're going to move up to the top hutch so that I can make room for some more Cornish crosses to grow out. Here's the nursery. Probably should have showed this first, but the nursery is in a 6x10 dog pen. And I've got a metal roof over the top of it, but I've got 4 hutches in here that are 2.5 by 3 foot. So it's 2.5 foot wide, 3 foot deep, and 24 inches tall. And I've got a hinged cover on the roof, but I've also got doors that open on the front. So this is, I've got, heated lamps in here, again, for the babies in the wintertime. And then I also cover up with clear reinforced tarps that I've purchased, and these really do well to knock down the wind flowing through there. Adjacent to it, I've got a 10 by 10 chicken. It's a dog pen that I've set up chicken coops inside there. And so I've got my egg laying hens in there. So my Rhode Island Reds are going to be rotated up here into this. I've got some older hens that are going to be rotated out. But anyways, that's the upper level. The things that I use for my rabbits are primarily these. So I have water bottles. It's a 64 ounce. So then I have these metal feeders, and then I've tried a couple different rubber bowls, but these Vortex to me have worked well. The lighter walled rubber bowls, the rabbits chew on them. I haven't really had that same problem with these Vortex. But you know, if you keep them in that Timothy grass and you keep the pellets filled up, they're going to be eating that rather than trying to eat this. So I try to get out there twice a day and make sure they've got, you know, grass and you know, feed and water. And so I go out there, you know, like 9:30 in the morning, and then I go back again like, you know, 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Another thing you're going to need is nesting boxes. Now, one of the things that I did do is I changed for, you know, when the mamas have a litter and we moved out to the grow out area, I actually use these chicken feeders, and I have 7-pound and 10-pound feeders. And this has worked amazing because the babies, for whatever reason, get underneath those metal things and they jump around and knock the food out. And on these, well, one, it holds a lot more food, and you just don't really run out. And I use these all the way to when they grow up to their 3 months and they're ready to be processed, and it just has worked out a lot better. The other thing is I've used these hanging lamps. So I've got these are heat lamps, and these are the bulbs that you put in there. They're infrared, and they work really well. All right, so when we're moving into modeling, you have to kind of basically, you know, draw out your hutches. And so, you know, I listed what my what I had in the nursery a few weeks ago, and these have all moved out in the grow cage already. But this gives me a visual of, you know, what I've got where, and so it tells me, you know, what the breed is that I put in there. So like this is a New Zealand white, Holland Lop, New Zealand, and then this is a brown, which is, it's still a New Zealand, it's just not a white. And then it tells how many babies were in here. And then I've got a table for which mom is what. I do have a permanent ear or ink ear tattoo kit that I bought, and I just have not implemented that yet, but I've got that on the list because that'll make it easy. That way I can keep track of which babies go where. You know, the babies kind of follow the mamas, but at about 2 months, the boys and girls start getting a little frisky, and so you have to separate them out. And by having the ear tattoo, you know, I put, you know, males of similar age together, and then I put females of similar age together, and I'll be able to keep track of who's who in case we start getting some kind of sickness or something. I'll know what happens. All right, so then the other thing is on my deck, this is now looking down on the deck, I've got, you know, 4 males here, which is excessive. I don't need 4 males, but, you know, sometimes these become pets. This one over here we call Jumbo. That's one of our earlier rabbits, and my wife just loves that rabbit, and so it's not going anywhere. Then I have a black New Zealand. I have another New Zealand, but he's like a mixed broken color, and then I've got a white who's kind of like my favorite to use with the other whites. And then these are the ones that I just moved out, so I've updated this table to show. So these are the 30 babies plus the 4 mamas in here. And then I've got these 4 others that I can actually divide up how I need to, so later if I got to split up males and females. But I've got another 4 females that are hopefully pregnant, and they're due to have their litters in, you know, any day now. And you know, they'll move out into here, And then by the time I have these mamas get pregnant, by the time they're ready to come out, these will be ready to be processed. So I'll have like a little rotation going. All right, so here's the approach you need to consider. You keep the bucks and does separate, except for breeding. And I'm talking about the mature ones that you're actually breeding with. And then you keep bucks separate from other bucks after about 8 weeks. Well, I shouldn't say that. I should say after 12 weeks. I keep them all the way together till processing, but once you're using them for breeding, then you definitely keep them separate. So I need to update this chart. This is actually after 12 weeks. I keep the bucks separate from other does, but you can keep bucks together all the way up to processing. That's fine, and keep does together up to processing. And then if you're going to end up breeding a bunch of does, if like I just had 4 does that were raised together, and they were just gorgeous, beautiful specimens, and I kept them together, and I ended up giving one to my buddy, and then the other 3 are now going to be used for growing or mating. And then you bring the does to the bucks when you're breeding, and you keep them together. Some people only keep them for about an hour. I've kept them together 2 or 3 hours. In fact, I freaking forgot before and had them out there almost all day. The poor mama was like, "Get me out of here." But you usually stand there and you watch to make sure that there's some successful matings. And I'll have some videos that show exactly what this looks like. But it's a very obvious thing when you have a successful mating. And then I also recommend mating no earlier than 5 to 6 weeks after their last litter. The mamas need to be at least 4 months old before you even mate them the first time. Also, I should have had that on this list. All right, so now here's a kind of a process flow chart. So you mate the rabbits, and then they kindle 28 to 34 days. So basically you say 30 days later you can expect some babies. Now I usually make sure that there's a nesting box. 21 days you start putting a nesting box, and I've done it a little bit earlier. Sometimes the rabbits just show sign, like they're pulling their hair out, or they're filling their mouth full of hay, and they're telling you, hey, it's coming. So you keep an eye on it. And then other times there's not one sign. You think, well, I guess she's not pregnant, and then you go out there in the morning and they had the baby. So you just never know. So you make sure you get a box in there, and you want to make sure you're early. Last you want is for the mama to have the babies on the wire. Just don't want to do that. Okay, so at 21 days, after they were mated, you want to get them in the nursery. Now some people, they don't have a nursery. I like to have the nursery because it's very secure. I'm controlling the amount of breeze that's going through there. I've got heat lamps, I got everything, and I think that's another reason why I'm having more success. But I think it's very helpful to do something like that. So when you got to go over this way. So I keep mine in the nursery for a total of 4 weeks right after they're born, and in that 2.5 foot by 3 foot, I mean, it starts getting tight. So you got to get them out of there. You'll know when it's time. The mama's going crazy because she's got no place to go. She'll be up on top of her nesting box trying to get away. But the babies are very lively by this point. So then we're moving out to the grow out area, and then at probably, I just watch. When I start seeing a lot of activity, then I start separating, and it's a pain at that point because you might have 9 bunnies in the one hutch, and you got to go through each one. And I mean, it's so funny that you would think it'd be 50-50, but it's not. I'll have 9 bunnies and 7 of them are males, or it could be 7 are females and only a couple the other sex. So it's just a strange thing. So I haven't quite figured out what it is that determines whether you're going to have males, mostly males or females. Might be temperature, I don't know. So then you remate the doe at 5 to 6 weeks after kindling. So that means after the babies were born. Then you move the doe out at around 2 months, and then you process the rabbits at 12 to 13 weeks. And the reason why I've got a little extra space in there is just because like in this case, I'm going to have 30 rabbits that are all going to be due pretty close to the same time, and that's just a lot of work. It's about 20 minutes per rabbit. So give yourself a little space here. Make sure you don't have the next rabbits coming out right at 12 weeks. So my process kind of includes that. All right. So this is something that, going back to that table that was, I think it was about slide 10, the pregnancy rate is about 63% average. So I plugged in 75% right now. And if I wanted to have 4 mamas with babies, you basically have to mate 5 rabbits to get, 4 with babies. And then that would mean that you're gonna, if you have, 7 rabbits per, or 7, babies per mom, you're gonna end up with 28 rabbits. So use this table, and this will tell you kind of like what your yield is gonna be for each set of litters. Now, I took a spreadsheet and I ended up putting together, the key times that it takes. So from when you mate to when they kindle is 30 days. And then when they come out of the nursery, this is cumulative days, so that's another 30 days. And then when I move them out to the grow out area, now you're at 90 cumulative days from when you mated them to when you put them in the grow out, and then you're, and at 60 days they're going to the grow out, and then they're ready to process at 90 days, and I threw in an extra week that allowed me to then have time for processing and before the next batch collides. So if we started the 1st of 2018, and you can, this is a nice thing about this table is, if you started in September, you just go ahead and put your date in there, whatever the first date is, and all this will go, it'll populate out and tell you, when you need to, start your next batch and the next batch and the next batch. And, if you had the same setup as I had, then you would know that, okay, they're moving out of the nursery on this date, so my next batch is coming in a week later. And that gives you time because, you got to clean that up. You got to I like to make sure it's spick and span so the next rabbits are coming in. It's kind of like you're renting an apartment. You want to make sure all the walls are painted and, the lights are changed out or whatever, and the, the water bowls are disinfected and everything else. And so you want to give yourself some time to accomplish that. And so this is basically saying then, this is moving into the next year, but if I add up the cumulative number of rabbits processed, I can get 112 rabbits the first year. Now, because if you're doing continuous production, you can see that I have another batch that started in 2018, but it finished in 2019. So I will end up with more rabbits processed or grown in the next year just because I had carryover from the previous year. So if I'm eating, if I took 112 rabbits divided by 52, that tells me I got to eat 2.2 rabbits per week to be able to keep up with that production rate. If I continue with this same plan, that means the following year I'm actually going to end up having to eat 3.2 rabbits per year. And that's actually okay with me because I have some friends that I give some rabbits to, and we actually have get-togethers, and I'll cook extra rabbits then. And so I actually need this extra production. And this is kind of roughly the way it's working out. But you can do planning with your setup, and this is a pretty extreme amount of rabbits to be growing, but right now I've got extra family living with us, and we're eating not only 2 rabbits a week, but 2 of the chickens we grew a week, and we still have pork and beef and other things for other days. So anyways, think about this. The rabbit is 2 rabbits equal, say, 5 to 6 pounds, where a chicken is 5 to 6 pounds each. So if I'm eating say 12 pounds of chicken and I'm eating 6 pounds of rabbit, you can see that it's that's a good amount of meat for the week. Oh, guess what? That's the end of the show. So anyways, I hope this has been useful to you. I'm still learning, but I feel like I'm ahead of the curve now, and I'm trying to put out a couple videos a week, and um, there's some things I've done recently just in the grow out cages that I think you'll find interesting as well. So anyways, I went about 10 minutes longer than I wanted to. I hope this is useful to you, and God bless, and be sure to subscribe and hit the little bell so that you get any notifications of my new videos.